But our new president and his Darth Vader, Bannon, have decided strategically, very strategically, this is not an accident, that the lowest ever is not low enough. Okay? The lowest ever is not low enough. So consumed, really consumed by the notion that some people might believe he stole the election with the help of fake news and illegal hacks, Trump has repurposed this term, fake news, weaponized it, and turned it onto the real thing. Just a few months ago, we all agreed with that definition, that fake news is simply false information that wears the clothing of journalism. But the president now argues that journalism with which he disagrees, or that is critical of his person, is fake, and it has nothing to do with truth. The term simply applies to journalism and information with which he disagrees. So that turns on its head the entire debate over truth and falsity, because we're not talking about facts anymore, in a sense. And because the resources of America's great news organizations have turned to covering the president with real vigorous skepticism, the news generated has to be, in the president's language, fake. That strategy helps build support in his base, which is already inclined to not trust the press. So it reinforces that basic mistrust. But it also delegitimizes journalism that is yet to be produced. It has a play-it-forward effect. Has the potential to chill journalists, and I think we're already seeing this in some circles, particularly on television. Has the potential to chill journalists early in the reporting process, dissuading them from tackling stories that might call their own legitimacy into question or deprive them of access. Especially in the TV and cable world, it's all about access. That's why a group of news anchors yesterday met with the President of the United States off the record to talk about policy. The President is talking about policy. He may be changing his position on immigration, and those news anchors, those journalists sat in the room after making an agreement that they would not tell the public what the President said. So already, the nature of how we're handling journalism is changing because journalists are not a monolithic force. Some people are going to play the game, and that's what happened yesterday. So the assertion that real news is fake news is built on these long-standing concerns, both on the left and the right, that the press can't be trusted. And had he simply stuck to claims that the press is biased against him, which is kind of where he was during the campaign, that means that statement could lead us to engage in a more meaningful discussion of press ethics. Bias is something we can talk about. I believe there is media bias. Of course there is. And it's relatively easy to discern. There's no mystery to it. Yes, the press is corporatized. Our mainstream media dominated by corporate interests. Yes, journalists have lost their working class identities. They've become part of the power elite. That's been a problem for the last several decades. Journalism fails to fully represent the lives of women, ethnic minorities, LGBT communities, the old, the disadvantaged, just about anybody who's not at the table. And we are taught, I teach, that one of our jobs is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, a phrase that is now being used to discredit the nature of journalism. But if responding to those concerns was all that was at issue, the press would have within its power the ability to respond. That's a discussion you can have. The ability to correct the missteps, to deal with bias, promote fairness and balance, improve transparency. These are all things that have to happen anyway if we're going to start working on those numbers, those measurements that show we have no credibility. We need to rebuild credibility and trust, and there's a conversation to be had on how that can happen. But the president goes far beyond that. It's not about bias anymore. We're enemies of the people. Think about that term, enemies of the people. He used it 3 times last week in public settings. His latest Friday, he used the term enemies of the people. But the press in this country are enemies of the people. He's getting credit for being more presidential last night. But he's not retracted this concept of enemies of the people. That's what he called the American press. And that is a loaded term. It's an evil term. It's been used by authoritarian regimes to justify murder and genocide. Enemies of the people have no standing in the country's justice system. And that's where it puts the press. It was a term chosen with deliberation, it's not an accident, and with malice and intent. Now, it not only challenges the credibility of the press, but it challenges our legitimacy, it challenges our very existence in this society. And make no mistake, the phrase is designed to pave the way for legitimized repression of journalists. And I'll make you this prediction. Hope I'm wrong. But then I predicted Donald Trump was going to be president to my students last February, so more than a year ago. But I hope I'm wrong. But here's my point. Journalists are going to go to jail for doing their jobs, and soon. This calendar year, maybe. And here's how it's going to happen. President Trump, with the help of his congressional sycophants, is going to wage war on the leakers in government, the anonymous sources for much of the journalism we have seen and we will see. They're already going after the leakers. They'd rather go after the leakers than go after the Russian ties. In pursuing the leakers, he's going to bring the resources of the administration to bear on the journalists who rely on that leaked information for their stories. And those resources are considerable. Under the umbrella of national security, we're going to see reporters' communications monitored, their phones tapped. We're going to see law enforcement engaging in deception, often even posing as journalists to obtain information on anonymous sources. We're going to see journalists subpoenaed to appear in courts, to reveal their sources, even the secret national security courts established for the war on terror. Now, somebody's going to say, what about the First Amendment? This is impossible. This cannot happen in the United States. Well, this is actually right out of President Obama's playbook. This is what President Obama did. Well, President Obama waged war on a free press, and he waged war on leakers. This is his playbook. All of these things happened under President Obama. James Rison, a national security reporter for the New York Times, came within a hair's breadth of federal prison for refusing to reveal the source of a report on an anti-terror program. And President Obama backed down at the very last moment. The Justice Department retreated at the last possible moment, only because of enormous pressure from within the Democratic Party looking ahead to elections and the uproar within the press establishment. But those tools are there, and they've already been used. James Rison's phones tapped, subpoenas. We know this. President Obama backed down at the last minute. President Trump isn't going to back down. Anybody who thinks he will is not paying attention. In protecting their sources, some reporters are going to go to jail for doing their jobs. There is no federal shield protection in the federal system. 32 states and the District of Columbia have shield laws to protect journalists from revealing anonymous sources, except under certain judicial circumstances. No federal shield law. No protection. The collision of Sixth Amendment and First Amendment is going to default to the Sixth. And reporters are going to go to jail. When their actions are weighed against the pressing needs of national security as defined by the administration, these enemies of the people will not stand a chance. That's what enemies of the people will do. And that's how it's going to start. Now, it could end there. Or get worse. It could end with irreparable damage to the First Amendment and to the institution of the Fourth Estate. It could end with our democracy further imperiled. It could end that way. Or the nation, in righteous anger, could stand up to defend a vigorous, free, and independent press, because it's going to take that sort of national response to save us from the pending disaster. Now, there are some encouraging signs. There's growing financial support for news organizations. The New York Times, the Washington Post are experiencing huge explosions of subscribers and revenue. Becky Talent, my colleague in the back of the room, the board of the National Society of Professional Journalists, perhaps later can tell you what's going on with that organization, which is experiencing a huge membership gain. There's support out there. But I am not of the belief, as I stand here today, that that support is sufficient enough to turn the tide into what I believe is happening. So I wish I could say I'm confident of that outcome. But I am confident of this. I'm totally confident of this. Despite the insults, threats, and very real danger, journalists are going to rise to the challenge. They already are. They will continue to do their jobs. In fact, I think we are seeing, not just in Washington, D.C., but some spillover into our local communities, an explosion of aggressive investigative reporting, certainly inside the Beltway, that we haven't seen since Watergate. And that spillover effect, I think, is going to energize journalists all over the country who are going to find themselves recommitted or recommitting to the values of the profession, waking from the recession-induced slumber that so damaged our institution, recommitting to the values.